Hello friends, uh, today I'll speak to you on section 34 of the Indian Penal Code. Why is it important? It's a unique section because section 34 is not a punishment section. It carries no punishment at all, but it can have a serious impact on the punishment that can be delivered upon the commission of a crime, right? So, section 34, what does it say? When a criminal act is done by several persons. What is several? It has to be more than one. It can be two, it can be three, it can be four, but it cannot be five. Because if it is five, then it becomes an assembly under 141 of the CRPC. Of the IPC, I'm sorry, of the IPC, right? So 141, it cannot be because that is an assembly. So we can have, when we say several, it really means 1, 2 to 3 to 4 persons. When they do a criminal act, a criminal act can be anything. It could be inflicting a grievous injury, committing a theft or a robbery, or committing a murder, whatever. If it is a criminal act, remember, if 5 persons commit a criminal act, then it becomes commit a robbery, then it becomes a dacoity. So the cutting edge, the ceiling, the limit is 4 persons. Several persons does not mean anything beyond 4 persons. If it is 5 persons, it can either be an unlawful assembly or they would be committing a dacoity rather than a robbery. Okay. Now, when it is done in furtherance of the common intention of all. So when 2 or 3 or 4 people gather together and a criminal act is committed, now all of them should share the intention to commit that act. It should not be that out of 4, 3 were committing the act, one was just passing by and was so struck by the sight that he became an innocent bystander. He cannot be. Also, if 3 people do not share the intention to commit the crime, but it is committed. For example, if a person wishes to just slap somebody, the other person comes along and he wishes to kick that person. The third person comes along and he wishes to box that person. And none of them had a common intention when they arrived to do it. They've just done it. So that cannot be a common intention. But if a criminal act is done by these several persons in furtherance of the common intention, for the realization of that common intention, then each such person is liable for that act as if it had been done by him alone. So if 3 people were to commit an act of murder with a common intention of murdering, say, X, now, whether one person delivered the fatal blow or the other person delivered the fatal blow, it does not matter. There was a common intention to commit that murder. Therefore, all 3 persons are liable for the act of the murder, and all 3 persons will suffer the same punishment under section 302 of the IPC. So can we go ahead? This is better defined, If you look at section 38, what does it say? Where several persons are engaged or concerned in the commission of a criminal act, they may be guilty of different offenses. They may be guilty of different offenses by means of that act. So what did I tell you? If the persons engaged are in furtherance of a common intention, they share the same intention, then they are hit by section 34. Then regardless of whether one person slaps, the other kicks in the third boxes, if the victim suffers a serious or grievous injury, all 3 are equally liable. But it can happen that people can get together by chance, by coincidence, by a factor of time, and commit various offenses against somebody. That does not mean the section 34 would be applied. For example, beautiful illustration has been given in the IPC itself. If A has been gravely provoked by Z, and the provocation is so great that he instantaneously reacts. For example, For instance, if Z is in the act of attacking the father of A, and A is seriously provoked by that attack, and so that he kills Z, it would be culpable homicide, not amounting to murder. It cannot be murder. It can be 304, not 302 IPC. Why? Because he has done it under the gravest of provocation. But at the same time, B, who has only some other ill will against Z, some other cause, some other reason for being very aggrieved with Z, hating Z, disliking Z, wishing to kill Z, comes there and helps A to kill Z. Right? A is attacking and killing Z out of grave provocation. Z is coming there for some other reason. He dislikes Z, but he sees A attacking Z, so he also attacks Z. So therefore, though A and B have both caused the death of Z, they will not be covered by common intention. What will happen? A will be held guilty of culpable homicide not amounting to murder. Whereas B, who came there to kill Z and engaged in that action which resulted in the death of Z, therefore Z is guilty of a different offense. He is guilty of 302. He is the one who has actually willfully, with prior intention, mens rea, come and committed the act of murder upon Z. So have you understood 34 and 38? 34 is very clear. If 1, 2, 3, 4 persons or several persons are going to commit a criminal act and they share a common intention, then regardless of who did what, during a theft, who broke the door, who lifted the gold ornaments, who shut the window, etc., it doesn't matter. They came for a common intention of committing a theft. Having committed the theft, they are all guilty of the commission of theft. It is not that one will be held guilty of trespass, the other will be held guilty of theft. No. They all would be held guilty of theft and would suffer the same punishment, the punishment for theft. But if these several persons, per chance, per coincidence, commit an criminal act together, but motivated by absolutely different intentions, they are not sharing their intention at all. A has been gravely provoked, B was anyway wanting to kill Z, they've just come together at the same point of time. So if that happens, then they would each suffer by way of punishment individually for the crimes, as if those crimes had also been committed, done or carried out individually. Okay. Now, the benchmark case, which clearly spelled out what Section 34 meant, dates back to 1925. It is the famous case of Emperor versus Barendra Kumar Ghosh, reported in 1925, judgment given in 1924. In this particular case, the postmaster of a post office was attacked by people. Allegedly, 3 people went inside, robbed him, killed him, while the 4th allegedly stood at the door and did not directly participate in the action of murdering the said postmaster. The court says that what is act? Act is not merely the commission of an act. It doesn't really mean that you have committed an act, that means it is an act. If you have omitted to do something, that can also be an act. If you have omitted to interfere with the murder is happening right in front of you, and you have share the common intention of robbing the post office, right? So even if you stand and do nothing, but if you share that intention to rob the post office and thereby kill that man in the process, then sorry, even if you stood there and twiddled your thumbs and did not interfere with the murder or with the violence, right? Your omission to interfere is also an act. So not only to do, but not to do can also be an act, provided there is a common intention at the same place. So what did the court say? It says Section 34, that means separate acts. They may be similar or may be diverse. They may be of the same kind or they may be different. But if they are different or of the same kind is irrelevant if they are done in the furtherance of the common intention. If so, each person is liable because as the section says, when a criminal act is done by several persons, then that act, which act? That criminal act. Then each of such persons is liable for that act as if it means the original criminal act. So criminal act, that act and it, they are all to be read in conjunction. So whoever was there, whoever was present is liable equally, even if he or she has omitted doing anything physically. The court famously quoted an idiom. They also serve who only stand and wait. It was done sarcastically. It was meant as an ironic expression, but it tellingly said, they also serve who only stand and wait. Aap khade, you are just standing and you do nothing. Doesn't matter. If you have gone there with the others to kill a man or commit an act of violence or commit any crime. Sorry. You have been there, you are bound by that common intention and you will suffer the same punishment on account of that common intention. Now, over a course of time, a certain amount of confusion crept into this. When does the common intention develop? How far does it apply? Does it apply to everybody who was present? Now, in the case of Jai Bhagwan and others versus State of Haryana, it's a 1999 case. It said, you must establish participation of the accused in the commission of the offense. Now, this is a major departure from the Barendra Kumar Ghosh case, where it had said whether you commit or you omit, or omit to do, you are liable. But in Jai Bhagwan case, the court said it must be established that the persons being accused, all of them had actually participated in the commission of the offense. So, but if common intention is proved and the common intention is absent, 34 cannot be invoked. Now, this is a very funny statement. On the one hand, the court said participation must be proved in the commission of the offense. The court omitted the word omission entirely, but it went on to say that no overt act is done, section 34 will still be attracted because it involves vicarious liability. What is vicarious liability? Your agent, you are a trader who are dealing in certain goods. You authorize your agent to sell certain goods to party B. The agent sells defective goods for which the party suffers. Now the party will claim damages against you, not against your servant, because you are vicariously liable for what this servant did. Okay, this is vicarious liability. Now, section 34 will be attracted, the court said, because it involves vicarious liability. But if the participation is proved and common intention is absent, section 34 cannot be invoked. Now, strictly speaking, when you say it should establish the participation of the accused in the commission, then you go on to say if participation is proved and common intention is absent, it leads to a bit of confusion. Let me give you an example. Suppose a person, 3 people come together to a person, each of the 3 tie a rope around his neck and pull in different directions. Now, if he dies and if there is a common intention, then all 3 are guilty of murder. But if none of them shared a common intention, then each is only guilty of an attempt to murder. Because who knows who actually committed the murder? Who pulled the rope so hard that he died? This was the confusion that reigned after the Jai Bhagwan case. Whereas in the Emperor case, it has been clearly said whether it is commission or whether it is omission. The Supreme Court in the Jai Bhagwan case made 2 opposing statements. Number 1, it said participation of the accused in the commission of the offense must be established. Then it said, but if no overt act is attributed, Section 34 will be attracted. It led to a lot of confusion, avoidable confusion. The confusion was worsened. Actually, much addition happened to the confusion in the case of Ramashish Yadav, also a 1999 case. The previous case of Jai Bhagwan was in February 1999. This case happened in September 1999. What did the Supreme Court in this say? Now it says that if you want to establish joint liability under Section 34, there must be a pre-arranged plan. Pre-arranged plan. It involved the element of conspiracy, which is defined in Section 120A of the CRPC. Sorry, of the IPC. So, pre-arranged plans. Now, it requires a pre-arranged plan and it presupposes prior consent. That means the people who are coming to commit a crime must have planned it, and mentally there must have been a meeting of minds in advance, like a contract. Like a contract, they must have agreed with each other, "Arey bhai, we will now go there and commit this crime." Peculiar, because that is the very purpose of 120A, where a conspiracy has been made to achieve an object. Then the court said that this prior consent or meeting of minds can be determined either from the conduct of the offenders during the course of action and the declaration made by them just before mounting the attack. It can also be developed at the spur of the moment, but there must be pre-arrangement or premeditated consent. Now I ask you, 3 people go to commit, arrive at a certain spot, A, B, and C, and X is there. There is a sudden quarrel with X. A, B, and C together get into the action of hitting him serious blows, and maybe X dies. Now, A, B, and C would have a common intention, but no, there has been no prior consent, and they have made no declaration. So it should be something like this: A, B, and C want to go and murder X. So they go to X, they say hello to X, and then they declare to X, "Look here, we have the common intention of murdering you." Once they have declared their common intention, then they murder him. Is that likely? Is that something which you can expect in common life? Perhaps no. So, whereas the Jai Bhagwan case had said participation, commission must be established, the confusion, and it had created one part of the confusion. The second part of the confusion was created by Ramashish Yadav case, where it said there must be a pre-arranged plan and there must be prior consent, which should either be unfolding when the conduct is going on. Who is going to preside over the unfolding? Who is going to see and judge during the unfolding of a crime whether the common intention is coming into existence? Or there should be a declaration, which I think, very humbly, in my very humble opinion, is rather difficult. It's not all that easy. Thank heavens, much of this confusion was set to rest by the Supreme Court in a 2012 case, Shamal Ghosh versus State of West Bengal. Thank heavens for this case. It has now finally made it very clear what Section 34 is, what it means, and what it should be. It said the common intention or state of mind and the physical act. The common intention, 34, state of mind, mens rea, the intention to commit a criminal act. Intention to commit a criminal act, mens rea, 34, common intention, and the act itself, the criminal act itself, all may happen at the spot and may not be the result of any predetermined plan. It is not necessary, unlike what was said in the earlier case, Ramashish case, it does not have to be the result of a predetermined plan. It does not have to be a conspiracy. The court said, what does Section 34 actually tell you? It tells you it is a simultaneous consensus of mind It's a simultaneous consensus of mind of the persons participating in the criminal action. You can call it simultaneous consensus. I could also say it is spontaneous consensus. It happens right there when the several people, 1, 2, 3, 4 people, persons have gathered at a spot. They'll say a fight with somebody. They start hitting him, and they form common intention to kill him. That intention comes from the fact that all three were fighting the same man for the same reasons. It is not that A was fighting with Z on account of grave provocation, and B had come because he heartily disliked Z. No. A, B, and C may be, farmers on a land. Z may be another farmer, and there may be a major land dispute. So A, B, and C may decide, chalo, aaj aar par karte hain. Let us see what happens. Let us go and meet Z once and for all. Once they are there, they have already gone with hostility in their mind. Hot words ensue. Very hot words ensue. And when they ensue, suddenly A, B, and C take to hitting Z with, gandasas, knives, sticks, battles, whatever you have. They had animus, a shared animus. With that shared animus, they went to Z, and while there was a common intention to inflict death upon Z. So, such a consensus can be developed on the spot. There is no need to have a predetermined plan. At best, the predetermined plan, in the example which I have just cited to, is the feeling of general anger. Animals, come, let's see what that is going to do about it. Let us thrash it out for him. Let us reach a conclusion once and for all. The actual criminal act, the act of the murder, an intention to that effect has been formed on the spot, on the spur of the moment, as a result of very hot words. Second part, which the court said, Section 34 involves vicarious liability, repeating Ramashish. So even if no overt act is committed, the section can still be invoked. Okay, now compare this with Jai Bhagwan, where it said the participation in the commission of the offense must be established. Participation in the commission. But this time, the Supreme Court reverted to the Barendra Ghosh case. What was that? Even if no overt act is committed, the section can still be invoked. But there is vicarious liability. 3 people have gone. For example, 3 people go, and 2 people start hitting the man with gandasas and knives. The third chap simply abuses him, maar dalo sale ko, finish him off, kill him, don't spare him, etc., etc. So he shares the common intention with A and B. A and B are hitting Z with knives or sticks, and C is with them saying, kill this man, finish him off. Once and for all, let us be rid of him. He is not doing any overt act. All he is doing is shouting. But he is vicariously liable now because of the common intention for the acts of A and B. And I have also explained vicarious liability to you. If something is done by my agent, in this case A and B are vicariously, notionally, they are the agents of C in actually doing the physical act of killing Z. So C is vicariously liable. So, though generally in law it says that a person is responsible for his own act, not for the acts of others, but 34 is a beautiful section. It is one section which says that a person can also be held vicariously responsible for the act of others if he had the common intention to commit the act. Are we clear on this score? Thank you.